She was coughing up blood, yet still being forced to take client after client. She was Alphonsine Plessis, the most famous high society courtesan in Paris in the 19th century. Everyone cursed her extravagant life, but few people know that it was her father who sold her to a wealthy businessman when she was very young. Her father even pinned a red camellia to her chest, saying every woman would face this day sooner or later. Alphonsine, who was inexperienced in the world, did not refuse. Her father was the only support that brought her countless pains, but she could not let go. She spent her whole life paying off her debts, and finally ended it all with death. Alphonsine was born into a poor family. Her mother died young and the family's livelihood depended on teenage Alphonsine begging on the streets. Every time he saw her getting a coin, her father would smile with satisfaction, and Alphonsine can get a kiss of appreciation from her father. But then his father used the money to buy things that fascinated him. Her father once said that Alphonsine's beauty was his wealth. But this wealth does not belong to him, but to those powerful men. The wealthy businessman who always gave Alphonsine coins fell in love with her youth and beauty, because every time Alphonsine would give him a slight smile in return. The father sold his daughter to this wealthy businessman with a family for money and promised to visit her every day. Alphonsine didn't blame her father. That was her only relative in the world. She sat on the carriage happily, coughing softly. Her face was pale, and there was a bit of smile in her eyes. When her father looked at her, there was no trace of guilt or pity. Alphonsine never thought that behind her father's smiling face was a cold-blooded calculation and manipulation of her fate. That day, her father came to visit her. Alphonsine was unhappy. Her eyes filled with unconcealable sadness. The father saw the sheets and understood everything. He comforted his daughter and handed Alphonsine a bright red camellia. Her father handed her a pill and said that if she took it, she would feel better. She took the pill and swallowed it, then turned her eyes to the wealthy businessman sitting aside. There was unabashed greed in the man's eyes. Alphonsine looked at her father stupidly again, but never noticed the indifference and hypocrisy in her father's eyes, and still believed in him unconditionally. She walked into the church with Camellias, but was despised and insulted by everyone. They called her a dirty mistress and a lowly prostitute, saying she had defiled the sanctity of the church. Suddenly, a kind-hearted priest reached out to help. The priest learned about her past and felt deep sympathy for her fate. He understood that Alphonsine was nothing more than an innocent soul oppressed by fate. Her father was the culprit. That night, the priest arranged for Alphonsine to stay in his home. Her eyes accidentally fell on the statue of the Virgin by the window. She suddenly felt uneasy and subconsciously grabbed the priest's hand. The priest was stunned for a moment and immediately let go, but there was an unconcealable flutter in his eyes. That beautiful face touched him deeply. He began to read those elegant and secret verses in the Bible that praised love and women. The voice was low and gentle, as if he was talking to the desires in his heart. When Alphonsine heard those words, she felt a sense of comfort that she had never felt before. She seemed to be hypnotized and lay on the bed. For her, this may be the only way she knows how to repay this care with her own body. The priest caressed Alphonsine's beautiful face. The morals and etiquette of the world seemed to become insignificant in the face of divine love. However, the next morning, Alphonsine saw a horrific scene when she opened her eyes. In the end, the priest was unable to heal himself due to his inner struggle and chose to hang himself. Alphonsine panicked and hurried back to her father. Faced with this sudden tragedy, in order to clear up the relationship, her father could only take her and flee in a hurry. They were on the ferry, and Alphonsine met a frail noble lady. She generously gave Alphonsine a plate of food. Alphonsine wolfed down the food, and the young lady couldn't help laughing, as if she had never seen such a hungry person. The young lady's father is a kind old man. Seeing that Alphonsine was weak, he handed her a warm towel and gently wiped away the residue from the corners of her mouth. He said Alphonsine looked exactly like his daughter and was equally frail. Afterwards, Alphonsine fell into a deep sleep. When she heard her father's cry and opened her eyes, she found that he was already on the shore. It turns out that her father sold her to Mike, a man he just met on the boat. Alphonsine's world fell into the abyss again. During the day, Mike performed at the market, attracting a crowd of onlookers. Alphonsine stood aside silently, holding a thin bamboo stick in her hand and busy making candies. But the world in her eyes was always dark. She hates this kind of life and doesn't know when she will be able to escape from this endless bondage. Finally, one morning, before Mike got up, Alphonsine quietly packed her simple luggage and left the dilapidated hut. She got into a carriage and came to Paris alone. She found work as a seamstress. Every morning, she starts her day's work. Her eyes ached from staring at fabric for so long. The stitches packed tightly together as the days dragged on without end. She never dared to hope for a better life. the reality constantly reminds her of her humility and powerlessness. The only thing that kept her going was the vague dream in her heart. She believes that she has the ability and the right to pursue her own future. She met a beautiful girl. The girl lived a hard life raising her son alone. She sewed in a factory during the day and was forced by her mother to take clients at night. Otherwise, her mother would beat her with fists and kicks. For the sake of her son, she had no choice but to be obedient. In 19th century France, it was common for lower-class working women to labor by day and take clients by night. After the Industrial Revolution, a large number of rural women migrated to cities. Lack of family support, housing, food and livelihood costs make it difficult for them to breathe. In addition, women's wages are only 1/3 to half of men's, making it impossible to maintain a basic life with full-time income alone. According to Paris police statistics from the time, around 1850 there were roughly 30,000 registered sex workers in Paris, and 70% of them worked part-time. The core group was those female factory workers and domestic servants. That day, an old female worker took Alphonsine to the theater where she worked part-time at night. She introduced Alphonsine to the theater's regulars. The guests in the box included titled nobles, successful businessmen and some celebrities. Alphonsine also met a beautiful and tall woman. This seemingly noble lady had once been a top courtesan. Later, she married a banker, changed her appearance, and became a frequent guest in the box. Paris is a city full of dreams and opportunities. Here, no matter what your past is, no matter where you come from, you always seem to find a way to redefine yourself. Alphonsine understood at that moment that this city could not only bring down people, but also make them rise again. As long as you are smart enough, beautiful enough, and perhaps courageous enough to pursue the future you desire. Her eyes couldn't help but rest on Count Perregaux in the corner of the box. His deep eyes and slightly tired look seemed out of tune with the hustle and bustle around him. Since the death of his wife, he has always been alone, with no scandals and no trace of his lover. Alphonsine couldn't help but feel deeply curious about this man. After the performance, she went out of her way to open the door for the Count, hoping that through this simple action, she could get closer to him, but the Count just nodded slightly and responded politely without any unnecessary expression. At that moment, Alphonsine felt a sense of loss in her heart, as if she was just an ordinary stranger, not worthy of his taking a second look. Alphonsine no longer wants to be a woman looked down upon. She made up her mind to climb up the upper-class society in Paris. She stood on the cold street, looking at the wandering women, and a deep sense of fear filled her heart. She once thought that she could maintain her last bit of dignity and would not fall as before. But at this moment, in the cold wind, she was hungry, and all her nobility and dreams were shattered. She also started taking clients at night. The first few times she felt so empty. When she gets bored, she reveals the red camellias on her chest. But that day, a regular customer stubbornly pulled her up and invited Alphonsine to his home. She had never seen such a luxurious mansion. The entire hall is as majestic as a palace. Expensive oil paintings hang on the walls, and a faint fragrance fills the air. Alphonsine was nervous and uncomfortable, feeling as if she had entered a completely unfamiliar world. Agenor seemed to read her thoughts. He said that all the young girls who come here will be ruined. They have fun here and spend their lives under the burden of jewelry. Just as he saw the naked Alphonsine at this moment, it was like seeing life itself. Agenor took off Alphonsine's clothes and showed her to her friends who had been waiting for a long time. Alphonsine understood and had no choice but to cooperate. She lowered her eyes, already understanding in her heart. Word of her beauty quickly spread among men. Overnight, she became the most popular courtesan in Paris. Men in the upper class regarded her as the lover of their dreams, and they played with each other every night. That day, Alphonsine unexpectedly met the old man on the boat. She originally thought that her encounter with the old man was just an accident of fate. Unexpectedly, this old man looks ordinary, but he is actually Count Stack, one of the richest men in Paris. After some conversation, Alphonsine learned that Count Stack's daughter, the frail girl from the ship, had passed away many years earlier. The Earl lost his beloved daughter, and every time he mentioned it, there was always sadness in his eyes that could not be erased. Alphonsine looks very much like his daughter. As if by fate, he found Alphonsine in his grief. The old Earl placed all his love for his daughter on Alphonsine. He told Alphonsine that if she got tired of this life, she could leave at any time. Alphonsine used the old Count's money to buy many luxury goods. An unprecedented sense of satisfaction quietly arose in her heart. The old Count never raised any objection against her. She occasionally feels a twinge of guilt. She knew that the Count's favor for her went beyond money. The old Earl's tolerance and generosity made her unable to refuse this kind of life. That was the sense of security she had always longed for. The kind of luxury and freedom she had never had before made her extremely dependent on it. Although there are many rumors from the outside world that Alphonsine is the old count's lover, but in fact, the old count's care for her was exactly like his own daughter, full of affectionate compassion and tenderness. Alphonsine also knew that she was just a substitute for the count's daughter. That day, she met Count Perigos again. He just stared at her quietly, as if expressing those long-repressed emotions with his eyes. Count Perigos's heart beat rapidly. There was an indescribable attraction in Alphonsine's eyes, as if she wanted to break through all his defenses one by one. The next day, the old count was reading his daughter's favorite stories to Alphonsine. Alphonsine suddenly discovered that Perigos was visiting. She immediately went to the old count and asked him for a sum of money. The old count was not angry. The cost of Alphonsine was just a drop in the bucket to him. Alphonsine also did it deliberately to show Perigos. On the one hand, she showed that she controlled the old count, as if asking the old count for money was a confirmation of her own worth. On the other hand, she also wanted to stimulate Perigos's interest in her. What she really longs for in her heart is a true love, not a simple money relationship. However, this did not scare Count Perigos. He launched a crazy pursuit of Alphonsine. At a high society dance, their breaths intertwined among the lights and moonlight, avoiding the crowd and walking out of the hall side by side. Under the moonlight in the garden, Count Perigos stared at Alphonsine, his eyes full of longing and pity. Alphonsine reciprocates with tender and deep love. After they held a simple wedding, they boarded a sailboat and left the hustle and bustle of Paris. She stood barefoot on the bow, leaning on Perigos's chest. Maybe this is what life is like. There is no hypocritical banquet, nor those calculating eyes. They came to Algeria together, after traveling for several months. Although everything was wonderful, the time was getting longer and longer, and Alphonsine could no longer find the same excitement she felt when they first met. Perigos's laughter, enthusiasm and his world seemed like a continent getting farther and farther away from her. He wants to take Alphonsine on his journey. This time, Alphonsine refused. Perigos was silent for a long time before finally agreeing. He knew that he loved freedom in his life and that no one could restrain him. If you can't do that, it's better to separate. But Alphonsine made a request, hoping that the journey would not end too ugly. Alphonsine finally understands that some love is born to be a journey and is destined to never have a destination. In the end, the two broke up sadly. When his father heard that Alphonsine was no longer what he used to be, he immediately came to Paris and stayed with her. Alphonsine returns to social circles and continues her life as a courtesan. Flowers, perfume, and jewelry are still all she has. Until that day, she met Dumas, the son of Alexander. He was young, handsome, full of passion, and was fascinated by Alphonsine at first sight. The friend sitting in the same seat is Agenor, a regular customer of Alphonsine. Dumas begged Agenor to help him connect. The next night, Alphonsine put on a beautiful dress and waited for the arrival of Agenor and Dumas. At that time, Alphonsine was already suffering from lung disease. That kind of morbid weakness made her even more attractive. Dumas' own background was not exactly respectable either. He is the illegitimate son of Alexander, and his mother is a tailor. Dumas saw Alphonsine shopping through the glass at the entrance of a store 2 years ago and fell in love with her at first sight. Since then, the two have fallen in love. Every minute and every second spent apart is a torment for each other. But Alphonsine's father hated such a poor boy. With Alphonsine's current living expenses, at least 3 or 4 lovers would need to provide money to survive. But Dumas, who is only 21 years old, does not have enough assets to buy a carriage, and Alexander did not like seeing his son spend every day with a courtesan. Although he warned his son to stay away from her, Dumas still couldn't control himself and went to Alphonsine. On Alphonsine's birthday, her father took a gift of nuts from Alphonsine's lover. Each nut is wrapped in a 1,000 franc note and contains a mint-flavored 100 franc note. Faced with these humiliations, Dumas felt ashamed. What he gave to Alphonsine was just a simple gift. After that, Dumas never came to Alphonsine again. When they met again, there was a dignified noble lady beside him. The two of them cuddled together, and Alphonsine couldn't help but feel jealous. What's even more annoying is that Dumas pretended not to see her at all. Her blood rushed to her heart and she felt extremely uncomfortable. Then she ran to the farm dragging her weak body. Drinking fresh cow blood is said to cure lung diseases. Every time she swallowed the hot liquid, she felt more pain in her heart. That day, her friends held a grand party. Dumas actually appeared in front of Alphonsine with the young lady again. He looked at Alphonsine with provocation. Alphonsine finally understood that he brought the young lady here just to arouse her jealousy and make her admit that she loved him. Once love is exploited, it loses its original warmth. Alphonsine wanted to say I love you, but she was choked by a certain dignity. The two left early, leaving the poor girl standing there in shock. Count Perregaux still can't forget Alphonsine. He came to her again, but at this time, she was recuperating in the countryside with Dumas. The father told Count Alphonsine where he lived. Although Alphonsine's health is deteriorating, she still lives and sleeps with Dumas every day. Until that day, Count Perregaux found her. Alphonsine rejected Count Perregaux not because he was bad, but because he was too perfect and stable. What the Earl could give her was protection, but not love. She would rather burn herself out in love than wither in stability. So she chose Dumas, the poor but romantic, passionate but naive young man. In his arms, she was finally no longer a doll decorated with money, but a real woman who dared to love and hurt. But she forgot that the love of Carpe Diem is destined to be short-lived. The more fervently it burns, the colder the ashes are destined to be. In the end, this love was like her life, bright and fierce, but it would eventually fade away. Almost all their expenses in the countryside were borne by Alphonsine. She sold her jewelry and carriage, sank deep into debt, and still had a household full of servants waiting to be paid. Her father went to the countryside and asked her to go back immediately. As a last resort, Alphonsine went to the old count again. The old count has always provided Alphonsine with a luxurious life and paid a lot of money. He even sold one of his properties with forest and land. Although there was a hint of helplessness and pain in his eyes, he still signed the house sale contract without hesitation. For the unrequited father's love in his heart, he left everything behind.
Mon capital à la Banque Dauphine est presque épuisé.
Il vous coûte si cher que ça?
Oui.
How he wished Alphonsine could live like a normal girl. The famous musician Liszt gave Alphonsine a pair of diamond earrings and invited her to listen to his performance just to catch a glimpse of her elegance. To make Alphonsine settle down, her father refused Dumas' visit outright. Dumas wrote her a breakup letter in anger. In the letter, he said he did not have the means to cover her expensive life, nor was he willing to sink so low as to become her kept lover, so it was better for him to leave alone. Under the shock of this letter, Alphonsine's health worsened. The doctors strictly prohibited her from going out again and she had to rest at home. But even if she coughed up blood, she still insisted on going to the theater. She put on a long black dress and a white camellia headdress, and appeared in the theater dragging her frail body. The light shone on her face, revealing her gray skin and sunken eye sockets. Some people looked at her with pity, some cast curious glances at her, and some looked scrutinizing. Every look was like another cut in her already fragile body. She was almost strangled to death by the stares. Her ex-husband, Count Perregaux, saw her vulnerability. The violent cough prevented her from holding on for another moment. Her vision began to blur, and her body swayed like a dead leaf in the wind. She got up and left. She was the only one in the empty hall. Suddenly, a familiar voice stopped her. He wanted to help her but was refused. There was a hint of self-deprecation and reluctance in Alphonsine's voice. She knew that her body could no longer bear this heavy love and responsibility, but the stubbornness in her heart that she didn't want to give up and the despair about her fate made her unable to stop. She finally returned home. At the last moment of her life, only her father was by her side. The devil-like existence at the beginning has now become the last angel in her life. Her face was pale and her eyes no longer had the luster they once had. She struggled to say something, but was interrupted by a violent cough. Alphonsine's eyes slowly closed. She felt at peace in her father's arms, as if she had finally found the relief she had always longed for. Dumas turned his relationship with Alphonsine into the novel The Lady of the Camellias and later brought it to the stage. It was a huge success once it was staged. At this time, 5 years had passed since Alphonsine's death. Her father appears in the background. He is a completely shameless man. After his daughter died, he refused to leave her even the last trace of dignity. Her clothes, jewelry, and letters were all treated as auction items by him and sold one by one. He even shamelessly urged Dumas to adapt it into an English language play, saying it would surely make more money that way. This amounts to outright blackmail. Dumas had no choice but to give him a lot of money. In the final scene of the film, he asks Dumas, "Do you know the last words my daughter said to me before she died?" She said, "I will never return to this world full of thieves and prostitutes again."